This is a first episode of the John Thomas Hill Show, and as you can tell, the day America gave up on the world, that was yesterday, and that was the day that Donald Trump pulled us out of the Paris agreements from last year concerning climate change. Let me talk to you about why I think this is a very bad idea, and I think in the end it'll actually do far more harm than if we'd stayed in there. First of all, the people that are applauding this the loudest are those who are benefiting short term from getting out of the Paris agreements. These are oil companies. These are very rich, powerful people that, quite frankly, do not want to change with the times, because that would actually mean you have to invest money and actually use money, not realizing that using that money could make them even more money than they have right now. You see, about 120 years ago, maybe about 120 years ago, there was this thing that came along called a car, an automobile. Now, before that, people got around with horse and buggies. And the horse people, the people that bought and sold horses, and the buggy people, the people that bought and sold buggies, didn't particularly like automobiles. And they did what they could to prevent you from driving into small towns, downtown, because they said it would disrupt the peace and tranquility. There was actually a law in my whole hometown of Forest City which meant that you had to call the mayor to let them know that you're driving a car into downtown. The reason is so they would alert the people to properly tie up their horses. This was back in the early 1900s, before, this wonderful thing called the automobile took off. Now, I'm all for progress. I think in many ways we've handicapped ourselves because greedy people, like these oil companies, like the Koch brothers, like those who are behind Donald Trump's campaign and presidency, do not want to change with the times because they are afraid that they will get beat, that they will lose money on an investment. Well, there's always risk in any time you invest money. But there's an old business adage: in order to make money, you must spend money. And the problem is, when you don't spend money, you don't make money. When all you are concerned about is how much expenses are going out, then the problem becomes, in many cases, that you stagnate and die a slow death. Look at Sears. Once upon a time, they were the retail giants of America. Those of us of a certain age remember what it was like to go to Sears. It was a big deal. Dad would get his automotive and hardware stuff. Mom would get her houseware stuff, and the kids would get their toys and whatnot. The Sears catalog was a pretty big deal back in the day. Now Sears is a shell of its former self. Why? Because Ayn Rand principles were brought to business. What happened? Sears self-destructed. Sears collapsed. Sears is a shell of its former self. It is going to eventually die. The only reason it is even surviving right now is because it is more expensive to shut it down completely than to keep it open. But eventually that's going to get to the point where Sears will have to shutter its doors. And my biggest concern is that the very people, the very principles that ruined Sears might ruin this country. The people that Donald Trump count on as supporters view government with suspicion. All of government. Not big government, not little government, all of government. Well, that's the problem in a democracy, because we, the people, are the government. We vote for the government. We vote for our representatives to represent us in Congress and in the presidency. So in the end, we're the ones who are at fault. You need to have government for a civilization to survive. It's that simple. But there are people who don't like to have rules. They live in big mansions, walled off from the rest of the world, with big security groups that can somewhat protect them against any threats. The problem is they do not see history. Many countries have had this before, where big businesses and the rich folks have not had to worry about any rules whatsoever because the government was bought and paid for. How many corrupt governments around the world have seen a rich ruling class and a very poor urban elite? How many times have the poor rose up? Do you want a communist revolution in America? Then keep doing what you're doing, Donald Trump. Because if poor people get that desperate, they will turn to that. Look at your history. Look at the reasons why we had a communist revolution in Russia to begin with. You don't think that couldn't happen here? Yes, it could. It would be bloody. Millions would probably die. And America, as we know it, would die. Russia and China would come in and pick the bones that was left of our country. And it would be the fault of someone named Donald Trump. Because instead of uniting us, he is dividing us. And this is just a mere factoid. The problem is a president should bring people together, and Donald Trump is all about splitting people apart. It's us versus them. He knows the way. But yet he's very, very negligent on facts. He says it's a bad deal. Why? Why is it a bad deal? Could we not renegotiate while staying in the deal? Maybe get a better deal for us and everybody else? Or, here's a thought, maybe we take that disadvantage and turn it to our advantage by investing in green products. Did you ever think of that? Of course not. Because if you invest in green products, that means you're investing money. Money that could get taxed. Money that would go to the workers to spend in the economy. You wouldn't want that now, would you? You'd rather have it in a tax haven somewhere, growing interest at a very small rate compared to what it would grow if you, say, invested it and people bought products, your products. You would make more money. You spend money to make money. You spend money on your workers. They do a great job. They're very productive. They make you a lot of money. They make a lot of money. They buy your product. Other industries spend more money on their employees. They make better products. They make more products. They make more money. They spend more money. You make more money. I am not an economic expert in any way, shape, or form. Neither was my dear departed mom, who's been gone for 10 years, but she had a great economic theory. It's hard for people to spend money when they don't have it. The problem is, in America, the poor and middle class don't have a lot of money to spend. And the rich folks aren't spending it enough to compensate for it. They're stashing it away. If the American economy is going to be vibrant, they need to go back to the way it was in Eisenhower's time, when there was a high tax, but there were tax credits when businesses and individuals would invest the money in new machinery, in better wages for employees, in better technology, in America, building more plants, buying more trucks, because the tax rate goes down. You make more money. If the tax rate doesn't go down, you can keep it and not spend it because, hey, I'm making more money keep letting it sit in the bank than it's getting taxed. And there's the problem. It's like a body, a human body. If the blood doesn't flow, what happens? The body dies. The blood is slow. You're not healthy. The blood is pumping well, in like a good economy, the body's healthy. So what we need is to inject money into the economy. And say to the powerful and rich, you either spend your money on taxes or you spend your money on workers and new equipment. And you'll find that if you spend your money on new work, better paid for workers and new equipment, what will happen? Those workers will spend money. They'll spend more money. They'll spend it on consumer products but that you make, that they make in those plants. That's why we need better job training. That's why we need to train these people in the jobs that we hear industry saying there's nobody here that can apply for the job. Well, guess what? Train them up. But they don't want to spend money on that because, we don't want to spend money on government programs. Guess what? You do anyway. But no, they want to spend government money on education. You've done it anyway. You did it decades ago, and it worked just fine. The problem is, 40 years ago, this idea that government was the problem and not the solution was bogus. It's neither, and it's both. Government can be a problem, but it can also be a solution. And it can solve the problem sometimes if we hold our government accountable, if we have auditing practices that keep government from becoming corrupt. Now, what's that have to do with the Paris deal? We're giving up world leadership. China is wanting to step in and take over the reins. Russia the same way. Russia's not getting out of the deal. Donald Trump is feuding with Germany. Germany, who look to be the leaders of Europe, who in fact are because Britain's leaving. I honestly wonder sometimes, where is this all going? What's the end game in all of this? My concern is that the end game is the eventual demotion of America to third world status. And the people responsible for that support Donald Trump. But I'm not talking about the ballot box. I'm talking about in contributions. You see, a lot of third world countries, the rich are powerful. They hold the poor down. In America, theoretically, the poor are just as good as the rich. They go to the ballot box, they can serve on juries. Their voice should be theoretically as loud as a rich man's voice. The problem is, rich men don't want poor poor folks to have a voice. Because if poor folks have a voice, that means the rich people pay more taxes, even though those taxes could be abated if they invested their money in new industries, in new equipment, in better wages. The best years of the American economy came when the tax rate was high. That is a true fact. Because businesses were looking for ways to not have to pay taxes. Get rid of the tax loopholes, get rid of the tax havens, and put tax exemptions in to new businesses, new equipment, expansion, giving workers better benefits, better wages, hire more workers, train more workers. You will get a better product. They'll go out to a populace that can afford to buy them. You want to beat globalization? Make American products superior. Make it worthwhile. Automation is costing us these jobs, not foreign competition necessarily. Train the people who once made the products into operating the robots that will make the products. That's that simple. You still need people to work. Train them to operate these robots that businesses want to have. But the problem is that the rich folks don't understand that they are slicing their own throats. They don't understand that this has happened before. Some survived, but they were lessoned for it. And they probably were damned to hell because, yes, they might have survived, yes, they might have thrived afterwards, but it meant people died because their protectors, the very government they scorned, have these things called soldiers. There is a very disturbing thing that worries me, and that is the fact that I believe that Donald Trump could eventually make it to where American soldiers are serving in the United States to prevent what he considers and what his supporters consider trouble. But a lot of his supporters are poor. They're white. And throughout history, this great nation's history, the rich whites have found ways to pit poor whites against minorities, which generally are poor. Why? I don't remember the exact quote, but Lyndon Johnson basically said, if you get a poor white man to think he's better than a poor black man, he won't mind the rich white man picking his pocket. I don't know the exact quote. I'm paraphrasing there. I may be way off, but it's something to that effect. It's been there all along. Right after the Civil War, when Reconstruction was going on and trying to make blacks at least somewhat equal to whites, what happened? Rich whites didn't like that. They wanted a cheap labor force, so they did what they could to repress blacks. Poor white folks were having a hard time. What's the easiest way to get them to stop glaring at the rich white people that had more than they do? Blame their problems on the poor blacks. Bring about old racial stereotypes. And there you go. The very people that wave around the Confederate flag don't realize they're the ones being screwed by the people who want you to wave that Confederate flag. Because they screwed you in the last Civil War. How many poor whites died for rich white people? How many? How many rich white people died in the Civil War? You got a figure for that? Not that many. It's been throughout history. The rich declare war, the poor fight it and die for it. That's what happened in the Civil War. And even now you've got people who romanticize the Civil War without realizing they're just as much of a victim as the black guy was, and the black woman. You don't realize that. Donald Trump is not the problem. It's the people that are supporting him in the White House by financing his whatever he's doing, financing his campaign, and financing probably his re-election campaign if it gets it that far. I'm not saying Hillary Clinton's any better. She may very well have been just as bad, if not worse. Who knows? That's why they have alternate history as a fiction category. Donald Trump's the guy that got elected. We knew what he wanted to do, and there are a lot of Trump voters that said, oh, he won't do that. They voted for him saying, oh, he won't do that. He told you what he was going to do, and now you're shocked that he's doing it? He's hitting you harder. And now you can't even see buyer's remorse because you're so blind at anger because Hillary Rodham Clinton apparently isn't perfect. Because she's not going to jail for the 4 people that died in Benghazi, even though she wasn't the one that killed them. It was the terrorists that killed them. How many Republicans do you know that in Congress that voted against increasing embassy security? When the very State Department that Hillary Clinton ran asked for more money for embassy security. But it's easy to buy into the Rush Limbaughs and the Alex Joneses and these Jim Bakers who wrap this propaganda in the veil of patriotism and blind faith toward evangelical Christianity, which is perverted against the message of Christ. And you wonder why you're being screwed. You're being screwed by the very people you voted for. You're being screwed by a man who doesn't know he's being used. Not by Putin, but by the Koch brothers, by the Sheldon Adelsons, by the people who fund ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, who write up bills to form a very radical right-wing legislative agenda and hand it to their paid people in state legislators and Congress to pass this and get it passed because that's what they want. To take power away from you, from me, from average everyday working folks, and to put it in the hands of the elite. This thing going around saying we need a constitutional convention. 28 states have passed it. We only need like 5 or 6 more to make it happen. They're not doing it for your benefit. They're doing it for theirs. Look at the money. It's all like Watergate. Look at the money. Follow the money. Where's it coming from to fund these things? It ain't coming from you. It ain't coming from me. It's coming from people who want to control the government. They don't want you to vote. They don't want you to have any power, any at all. They want to rule you. They want an oligarchy. And you don't see it. Not that the Democrats are any better, because in many ways, the Clintons are just as much to blame, because they're in bed with the Wall Street elites every bit as much as Donald Trump is. That's why the Bernie Sanders people were such a threat to the DNC. Because Wall Street wants to play both sides against the middle. They want to control the game, so that no matter who wins, they win. And Donald Trump is the easier pawn. Donald Trump is a sacrificial lamb. If he gets impeached and convicted, so what? Michael Pence goes into the presidency. He'll make believe he calms things down when the very people who are screwing you over will continue to screw you over. It's not government, it's big corporate businesses who want to have no rules. They want to do whatever they want, whenever they want, however they want, to you, to me, to the economy, to the environment, to the world, to anybody that stands in their way. They want to run the schools for a profit. They want to run your hospitals for a profit. They want to run the prisons for a profit. They want to run the very water that goes into your house and into your body for a profit. They want to, if they can do it, they want to have the very air that you breathe turn into a profit for them. And you don't realize the danger. There's a reason why rich white folks pitted poor white folks against blacks, the poor blacks back in the day. Because the poor blacks and poor whites realized just how bad the rich white folks were screwing them over, things might change. I'm not saying there would be a communist revolution in the United States, but there's this thing called a ballot box. Equal rights voting means that there's more poor folks than rich folks. That means the poor folks can vote people in that represent their interest and not the rich white people's interest. But there's this thing called money, and money is speech. Corporations are people, money is speech. But they're not. But the people running those corporations want you to believe that corporations should have the rights of people. They want to be able to tell you how to live your life. The government shouldn't give you rights, corporations should. Your boss should be able to tell you how to live your life. You're gay? Well, your boss says you can't be gay unless you want to lose your job and be blackballed. You don't see the enemy. It's not just Trump. Trump is a small part of the picture. This isn't a conspiracy theory. This is fact. This is as plain as the nose on my face and your face. You just have to take a look at it. Stop listening to the propaganda people. I'd say even stop listening to the liberal propaganda people like Rachel Maddow and such. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Stop listening to Hannity's and the Limbaughs and the Alex Joneses and all these people. Stop listening to the radical evangelical pastors who think that if you dare oppose Donald Trump, that you are the Antichrist, that you're a traitor, that you're damned to hell for not kissing Trump's feet. Donald Trump is not Jesus Christ. Donald Trump may not be the Antichrist, but he is not the Savior either. He is simply a businessman playing around at being a politician without realizing that there are people far more powerful and far richer than he is playing him. He is a fool. And he's being manipulated by people who know how to manipulate a fool. Vladimir Putin is not the only one manipulating Donald Trump. Follow the money. The Tea Party is not a grassroots movement. It's funded by the very same people. They want you to have affordable health care. They want you to have health care if you can afford it. If you can't afford it, so what? You die. As long as they make money. And they don't have to spend money to make money. If it destroys the planet, makes it uninhabitable, makes it to where thousands of years from now when an alien civilization finally arrives here and looks and goes, what the hell happened here? Why should there not be people here? They'll see evidence of civilization, but they won't see us because we'll be dead. And we will have killed ourselves. We'll have killed all the animal life. Maybe there'll be some bugs around, maybe some snakes, who knows? But we won't. And we'll be the ones that have killed ourselves. The Paris agreements weren't perfect. There are parts of the deal that didn't really benefit the United States at all. But instead of trying to negotiate a better agreement, or at least make changes to the agreement, Donald Trump took his ball and took our ball by proxy home. And thus, Donald Trump gave up American leadership of the world. Maybe not in reality yet, but it's the first step. There are people who want us out of NATO. They want us out of the UN because it supposedly gives up American sovereignty. But yet, are we not the leaders of the free world? If we're leaders of the free world, should we not be in the UN or NATO or in these agreements to lead the way? You don't lead if you're sitting by yourself in a corner, looking at the other people who are looking around for people to lead the way. China's ready to pick up the baton and say, hey, follow us. Russia, the same deal. Germany, the same deal. Maybe even Brazil if they get their act together. Perhaps even India or Saudi Arabia or Iran. Or maybe somebody else. The problem isn't poor people. It never has been. The problem's always been the rich like to play the poor people like pawns. And you're being played as a pawn in a game that you don't understand. They make profits off prisoners. They make profits off your health. They want to make profits off your kids' education. They want to make as much profit off of you as they can. If they can make a profit off your organs, they do it. They may very well do it one of these days. That is the danger, ladies and gentlemen. The danger of an American system gone awry. That is something you must be careful of. That's not something you have to be aware of, ladies and gentlemen. Because what we are seeing right now is dangerous. It could lead to civil war. It could lead to the destruction of this nation, not by some foreign enemy, but by our own hand. Abraham Lincoln once said, I think maybe he was the one that said this, the only people that could destroy America is Americans. Well, we're the Confederates. Americans. They nearly destroyed this nation by splitting it asunder. To support a cause that was reprehensible and should always remain reprehensible, keeping millions of African Americans in chains for the economic benefit of the rich. Not the poor. Not the poor whites that fought the Civil War. It's not about states' rights. It's about keeping an economic system that benefited the few in spite of the many. But we're not supposed to look at that. We're supposed to look at the brave soldiers who fought a principled war to protect states' rights. The problem is, it's divide and conquer. The states have too much power. It means the corporations can come in and dominate states that are willing to give them that control. States like Texas and North Carolina, where they can go, well, we're going to do what we want to do, and you can't do anything about it. You don't want to live in an area where they have pollution? Move somewhere else. Move to a state that has better environmental controls. But should that not be everywhere? Should we not have better economic controls for the entire country, for the entire world? Climate is not an isolated thing. It affects the entire world. Storms come and go. Hurricanes don't just affect one state and not another. They can hit multiple states. They can impact states that don't even have anywhere near the hurricane. The winds, the rains can affect states hundreds of miles away from where the hurricane hits. We're supposed to believe there's no climate change. We're supposed to believe that all of this is fiction. But when 97% of all scientists agree that climate change is real, 97%, are we to believe 3%? And that probably isn't even right. It's probably more like 99.7%. There's a disturbing trend in this country. It's a trend that may lead to our downfall. People that know something, experts, aren't being listened to. People who know and can help solve the problems aren't being listened to because the very people in power want you to know that no such problem exists, even though it's right out there. Climate change is real. It's very real. It's not some hoax perpetrated by the Chinese government or the Russian government or anybody else. Doesn't matter if it's man-made or natural, it's happening. And you're not doing anything about it. Because businesses don't want to spend the money to do anything about it. Because they don't want to have to affect their bottom line. They don't want to have a smaller dividend. They don't want to affect their profit margins, even though they may very well make even bigger profit margins and have much larger growth down the road. What dooms Sears is the fact they didn't adapt to the times. Walmart, for all its evils, there are plenty of them, trust me, I used to work there, they have at least been shown to adapt to some of the times. Maybe not in ways that really truly benefit the employees and the customer and their own profit margins, I might add. But they're at least willing to adapt. Sears didn't, and they're nearly extinct. Radio Shack didn't, and they're nearly extinct. Kmart didn't, and they're nearly extinct. Many other businesses didn't, and they went extinct. But for some reason, the idea that you minimize expenses to maximize revenues became don't spend anything and make as much money as you can so that the profit margins are artificially high. Doesn't matter if I only spent 10 cents on an item and it's cheap as all get out on break. I made $5. Where if I spent $2, I might make 30. And have a much better product and may have customers coming to buy more. Why is McDonald's having such economic difficulties even though they're supposedly the biggest restaurant chain in America and the world? Because their products are crap. They want to spend as little as they can to make the most money. And they're not getting the job done. The businesses that are succeeding are the ones that are spending money and are making money. Pulling out of the climate change will not make America better, not make America great again. Instead, it will make us lesser in the eyes of the world, and eventually lesser in the eyes of the people here. Except for those who blindly follow Trump because their pastor told them to, or their boss told them to, or somebody on the radio like Rush Limbaugh told them to, because they're supposed to hate that which is different from them, even though there's not that much different from them. And that's the problem, ladies and gentlemen. We are dooming ourselves because we emphasize the differences and diminish the similarities. We're accentuating the negatives and eliminating the positives. That is what we're doing, and that is what is going to damn this nation to extinction. And it scares the hell out of me, and it should scare the hell out of you. You can't always get what you want. But if you try sometimes, you just might find you get what you need. The only problem is, ladies and gentlemen, is that a lot of rich folks didn't listen to Rolling Stones. They want what they want, and they want to get it. And they have to step on you, me, and everybody else to do it. They will. Without realizing that giving will come back in turn to help them out. We live in a nation where the message of Jesus Christ has been twisted by politicians and charlatans and scoundrels into something perverted for the message of Jesus Christ. When He does come back, some people are going to be in for a very rude awakening. They may think their ticket is to heaven through the pearly gates, but their ticket will tell them when they get it, they're going to a much warmer climate. In closing, Donald Trump isn't the problem. The problem is the people backing Donald Trump. The mentality that they rule and you drool. That you should not have a voice. That just because you live paycheck to paycheck, or you only work 40 hours a week for a standard wage, or you have to send your children to a public school and go to Walmart to shop and use coupons, and you fret about the price of gas, that you're so worried about microeconomics. Let the big folks handle the macroeconomics, because that's the game they're playing. But the game they're playing is using you as a pawn. But it's time to stop being pawns and start being knights and bishops and queens and kings and rooks. I'm not talking about a communist revolution or anything like that. I'm talking about the people getting back in control. Being a government of hands up, not hands up, not hands off. Being a government that builds bridges and roads instead of just lets them rot. Being a country that supports education, not we'll just let some shady businessman handle that and cloak it in a little bit of religious education, even though they're not really teaching him anything except from a book. Are we to hand our educational system, our healthcare system, our prison system to some private corporation to run as they see fit, without any control by the government that we elect, that we oversee? We don't elect corporations, we elect governments. The government has sold ourselves out to corporations. It's our fault. We can change the course. It's not too late. The next election is coming up. You may have to hold your nose, but you better vote Democratic. Because if you vote Republican, you vote for Trump, you're not really voting for yourself. You're voting for people who don't care for you, who think you are trash, who think you are crap, who will step on you and not even flinch. That is the reality. You want to be crap? Or do you want to have a voice? You don't have to agree with everything I stand for. You don't have to agree with anything anybody else stands for. But understand this. There is something that has been going on for a long time and is continuing on right now. Selling out our nation to corporate interest. Donald Trump is right about globalization. But it's inevitable. There are two choices. Who rules the globalized era? Us, the people, or the corporate elite? It's time to take a stand, ladies and gentlemen. It's time for the people to stand up to corporations and say, we have an equal voice. We will be heard. As consumers and as employees, we have a right to fairness and to prosperity. It's time we stood up for that. Thank you. Good night. Good luck. And may the good news be yours.